My name is Claire Bennett. I was 34 years old the day my little sister walked onto my hospital floor like she already owned it. I was writing notes at the ICU nurse's station when I heard her laugh in the hallway. That same bright, practiced laugh. My whole body went cold before my brain caught up. My sister. 2,000 miles from where I left her. Stay with me, because what she asked me to do 6 weeks later would cost me the one thing I had spent 7 years earning. Welcome back to Twisted Family Revenge Stories, where we talk about the quiet hurts inside normal-looking families, and the people who finally stop saying sorry for surviving them. Comment below, and don't forget to subscribe, because this one gets worse before it gets better. First, understand what I had built. It took 6 years, and it was mine. When I landed in Idaho Falls at 27, I had $400, a nursing license, and nobody who knew my last name. I rented a room above a garage. I took every night shift they offered. I studied that ICU like it was scripture, until I could read the monitors like a book. A nurse named Patricia Hale trained me that first winter. She became the closest thing to a mother I'd had in years. Our lead doctor, Dr. Whitfield, once told a room of young doctors, "If Claire Bennett says a patient is turning bad, you move." That was a life I built with my own hands. Nobody handed it to me from a window while I watched from outside. Because here is the part my family never said out loud. Here is the sentence I carried across the country like a stone in my coat pocket. They always found room for Megan. For me, they found a plate on the porch. I never told anyone about the porch, or the plate, or the 7 Thanksgivings I spent watching taillights drive away without me. I just worked. I got good. I got quiet. I got free. For 6 years, it held. Then a woman from Human Resources walked our brand new director down my hallway to meet everyone. Her heels clicked on the floor. She turned around. It was my sister. Smiling at me like I was a photo she'd been waiting years to take. You'd think a family that leaves one daughter home alone would need a good reason. Mine never needed a reason that actually made sense. When I was 9, they said I'd get carsick on the drive to the lake, so I stayed with a neighbor while they took Megan. At 12, the theme park tickets only came in sets of 3, so I stayed home. At 15, it was about money, funny, since Megan got a ski trip that same winter. There was always a reason, and each one sounded fine by itself. That was the trick. You can't fight something that sounds fine. If I cried, I was dramatic. If I asked why, I was starting trouble. My father used to say, "Claire, don't make your mother feel bad," as if her feelings were the fragile thing in the room, not the 12-year-old learning she came in second to her own sister. Megan didn't do this to me. Not really. She was 4 years younger, and she just lived inside the warm part of the house, the way you live inside whether you were born into. She never once stood on that porch. She didn't even know it existed. So when people ask why I don't just talk to my sister and clear the air, I want to tell them the air was never the problem. The house was built crooked before either of us could walk. You don't clean up a crooked house. You walk out of it. The HR woman was still talking when the floor dropped out from under me. "Claire, this is Megan Carter, our new director of patient experience." Carter. She'd taken her husband's name. For one merciful second, I hoped she was a stranger. Then Megan said, "Actually, Sharon, we already know each other." Her smile widened. "This is my sister." I watched every nurse at that station quietly file that information away. Director of Patient Experience sat over every department, judging how patients felt treated. Which meant my sister now had a direct line into how my own work would be judged. I kept my face flat. I have kept my face flat over a coding patient. I could hold it over this. "Welcome to Idaho Falls," I said, and shook her hand like she was a stranger. Her hand was soft. Mine had 2 years of hospital soap built into the skin. "I didn't know you were here," she said, sounding warm and surprised. I almost believed the surprise. Almost. Behind the warmth was a small, satisfied stillness, the look of someone who'd just found the last page of a book she'd been trying to finish. She had known. Maybe not the room, but the city. You don't take a job 2,000 miles away and just happen to bump into the one relative who lives there. I smiled, went back to my charting, and my hands did not shake. That felt like a small, cold victory. By the end of that week, there was already a story, and I hadn't agreed to a single word of it. Megan told it in the break room, to Patricia, to the charge nurses, to a young resident who didn't know better. Claire and I lost touch for a few years, she'd say, light as a napkin. And then the universe puts us in the same hospital. She'd rest her hand on my shoulder every time she said it. I couldn't shake it off without looking like the villain. That's the part nobody warns you about. When someone builds a pretty story around you in public, refusing to play along makes you look cruel. She'd call me sis in front of the whole unit, and everyone would smile, because it sounds sweet. And every time, I'd feel the old machinery start turning under my feet. The machinery that whispers, your job is to make this look good for her. I watched Patricia soften toward Megan in 3 days flat. Patricia, who was supposed to be mine. She seems lovely, Patricia said. Sure, I said, and wrote down a pain score, because the alternative was explaining a whole childhood in a hallway. The stage was up. The lights were warm. I had been cast again, with no audition, in the exact role I had driven across the country to escape. She wasn't here to reconnect with me. She was here to reunite with me, in front of an audience she'd already found. Here's what made it worse. For the first time in years, I actually wanted something out loud. The ICU manager job had just opened when our old manager retired. Dr. Whitfield stopped me by the medicine cart. Apply. Don't argue. I don't usually take compliments well. I didn't argue with that one. I wanted it. Not the title, the say. I wanted to build a schedule that didn't burn people out, hire nurses who'd actually stay, run the unit the way I'd quietly been running it for 2 years already, while someone else sat in the office. It was mine to earn, and I could feel it, right there, within reach. But reaching for something means exposing your whole side, because the decision would go through a panel. And that panel weighed unit culture and patient experience scores. And you already know exactly whose department owned those words now. I told myself it didn't matter. Skill is skill. But I had spent a whole childhood learning that being the most deserving person in the room doesn't get you a seat in the car. Merit was never the real currency in my family. Being easy to love in the moment beat being right for the long run, every single time. And now the woman who had always, effortlessly, been easy to love stood 3 doors down, wearing a badge that gave her a vote on my future. I applied that same afternoon. Hitting submit felt like handing someone a knife and asking them to hold it carefully. That night, my mother texted me for the first time in 7 years. I know it was the first time because the old thread was still there, a gray wall of the last words she'd ever said to me, back when I was 27 and packing my bags. Her new message sat right on top of it, like none of that had ever happened. Megan told us where you are. We're coming to visit. Your father misses you so much. Love, Mom. I read it standing in my kitchen, the fridge humming behind me. I had never given them my address. My whole life here was built on the foundation of them not knowing where the door was. My sister had handed them the map during her second week in town. Your father misses you so much. Not, I'm sorry. Not, we were wrong. Just, we're coming, and you'll host the feeling, the way you always hosted the feeling for everyone else. I put my phone face down on the counter. Then I picked it back up and read it again, because that's the thing about a wound that old. Part of you still leans toward that voice. Part of you, 34 years old with clean scrubs and a good life, turns 9 again for 1 second, hoping this is finally the year they packed a 4th ticket. I hated that part of myself. I had spent so much money and so many miles trying to kill it off, and there it was, still alive, leaning toward the text like a plant toward a window. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I found out they'd already booked the flights. They landed the following Thursday and stayed at a hotel near the highway, which they mentioned twice, as if a hotel room were a gift they were giving me. My father hugged me in the lobby like the last 7 years had just been a long weekend apart. He smelled the same, cedar and coffee, and my throat did something I hadn't given it permission to do. "There she is," he said. "There's my girl." My mother, Linda, hung back half a step. Her first words were, "You're too thin. Are you even eating?" 7 years apart, and the opening line was about my body. We went to an Italian place because Megan picked it, and Megan picked everything, the way you let water run downhill without thinking. It was the 4 of us in a booth, a perfect family photo, except one person kept checking the exits. I watched my mother arrange the whole table's mood like she was setting out napkins. She laughed at my father's jokes a beat early. She told the waiter we were celebrating being all together again. She built the scene brick by brick, and the scene had one shape only. Nothing ever happened. No porch. No plate. Just 2 sisters and their proud parents. And if I said one word against it, I'd be the one who ruined the reunion. I recognized that architecture immediately. I grew up inside it. What I hadn't expected was how fast my own hands remembered their old job, reaching for the bread, refilling water glasses, smoothing everything over for everyone but me. I put my hands in my lap and made them stay there. The conversation had a gravity, and the gravity was Megan. Her promotion first. "Director," my mother said, tasting the word like wine. Then photos of my niece, Emma, her dance recitals, her reading scores. My father asked me one question, whether the winters were hard. Before I finished answering, my mother was already telling Megan she looked tired and should let her husband take over more. 20 minutes in, I was decoration. I decided to test it. Small and calm. "I'd rather not spend the whole visit on the past," I said, "but I do want to talk about some of it while you're here." My mother's smile didn't move, but her eyes did. "Oh, Claire. We didn't fly all this way to dig up old business." Dig up. Like the porch was a body I kept insisting on digging out of the ground. My father put his warm, heavy hand over mine and said, "Let's just enjoy tonight, sweetheart." There it was. The whole system, in one gesture. Comfort, used as a wall. I looked at my sister, expecting a smirk. Instead, she was watching me with something close to worry, and that unsettled me more than a smirk would have. I excused myself to the bathroom and stood at the sink, breathing until the mirror stopped shaking. I tried one more time, in the parking lot, because apparently I'm a slow learner with a stubborn streak. I just said it, plainly. "Mom. Do you remember the Thanksgiving before I left? You left a plate for me on the porch." I said it quietly. I wanted to see if the words could exist in the air between us without the whole building falling down. My mother's face did something complicated. For one moment, I saw it, a flicker of fear, or the exhaustion of a woman who has spent 40 years holding a story together with both hands, and cannot let go of one corner without the whole thing collapsing. Then it closed shut. "We're family," she said. "Family doesn't keep score." My father said, "Linda, it's cold," and steered her toward the car. Megan touched my arm and murmured, "She means well, Claire. She really does." And I stood there in a parking lot, 34 years old, and finally understood why they'd come. Not to make things right about the porch. To bury it. To fly 2,000 miles and pour a warm dinner over it until it disappeared, so the family story could stay smooth, and my mother would never have to look at the corner she'd been holding on to her whole life. They didn't want their daughter back. They wanted the record clean. And a clean record required my silence. I drove home alone. I did not cry. That night I lay awake wondering what was wrong with me, that being loved required this much editing. The visit ended, but Megan didn't leave, because Megan lived here now. That was the trap I kept forgetting the shape of. Monday morning, she was back on my floor, clipboard in hand, running her patient experience initiative. It sounded lovely. Underneath it was a knife with my name carved into the handle. She shadowed my rounds. She watched me tell a grieving family honestly that their father wasn't going to wake up, because they deserved the truth, not false hope. Afterward, in the hallway, she said gently, "You're so good with them, Claire. I just wonder if we could soften the delivery a little. Warmth scores really matter to the board. Soften the delivery." She said it kindly, which is how the worst things get said. My bluntness had held families together during the worst hour of their lives. But now it had a name in a report. And the person writing that report shared my last name and my mother's phone number. I could feel a frame going up around me, board by board. Not exactly a lie. A twisting. My directness, which was my skill, was being quietly relabeled as a warmth problem. A Claire problem. "I'll keep it in mind," I said. She smiled and wrote something down. I walked into the supply closet, pressed my forehead against the cool metal shelf, and stayed there for a slow count of 10. She left a plate on my desk that Thursday, and the entire floor of my childhood fell straight through me. I came back from a long shift, bone-tired, and there it sat in the charge office. A real plate. A slice of homemade apple pie under plastic wrap, and a folded note in her round handwriting. "Truce. I've missed you more than you know. M." I stood over it and could not breathe right. She didn't know. That's what I kept telling myself, and it was probably true. She had never stood on that porch. She had no idea a plate of food left as a gift was the exact shape of my oldest wound. To her, it was pie. To me, it was the last Thanksgiving. The storm door locked. The taillights pulling away. A paper plate going cold on the boards while I stood behind the glass and understood my whole place in that family in one image. A plate is what you leave for someone you didn't bother to set a place for. My sister had walked into my new life and, without meaning to, recreated the exact gesture that ended my old one. I didn't eat the pie. I couldn't. But I didn't throw it away either. I peeled off the wrap, scraped the pie into the trash, washed the plate, dried it, and slid it into my bag. I kept the plate. I didn't know why yet. I just wasn't finished with it. The worst part of that month wasn't even Megan. It was Patricia. She sat next to me in the break room, patted my knee, and said the thing. "You should give her a chance, hun. She's your sister. Family's family." I looked at Patricia and felt something I hadn't felt in this building in 6 years. Alone. Because from where she sat, none of this made sense. A warm woman named Megan had shown up, clearly adoring her prickly older sister, and the prickly one was holding some grudge nobody else could see the reason for. I had never told Patricia about the porch. My entire survival plan out here had been to arrive with no backstory, clean, skilled, free. And the cost of that clean slate was that when my family story showed up in a nice sweater, I had no counterstory on file. Family's family is a sentence that sounds like love, and works like a lock. It's the sentence that keeps the family scapegoat trapped in the yard. "It's complicated, Patricia," I said. "It always is," she said, and squeezed my knee, and meant it with her whole good heart. The machinery had reached even here. There was nowhere left in my life the old story couldn't follow. Megan brought Emma to the hospital one day, and watching my niece for 1 hour taught me more than a year of remembering ever had. Emma was 7 and unnervingly well-behaved. She sat quietly where her mother placed her. When I offered her a juice box, she looked up and asked, "Is that allowed?" Am I allowed? Something in my chest folded in half. I knew that question. I invented that question. I'd asked a version of it my whole childhood, silently, at every doorway of that crooked house. Am I allowed to want something? Am I allowed to take up the space a person takes up? Emma was already learning it, in a warm house, from a loving mother. That's what undid me, because it meant the machinery didn't even need a villain. It just needed a script, passed down hand to hand. I crouched to her height and said, "You're allowed. Juice is always allowed. You never have to ask me for a drink of water. Not ever. Not here." She studied my face like I might be tricking her. Then she took the juice with both hands and whispered thank you 3 times. Megan scooped her up and said, "She's so easy, aren't you, baby? Your mommy's easy one," and kissed her hair. Emma beamed at being called easy. I turned away and pretended to check a monitor. Mommy's easy one. That's how it starts. Nobody gets left on a porch on day 1. First you learn that easy is the price of love. Then, one holiday, they test whether you'll pay it. Megan floated the real idea to me in the parking garage, casual as weather. "I was thinking," she said, spinning her keys, "we should do Thanksgiving together this year. All of us. A real reunion." Thanksgiving. Of every holiday on the calendar, she reached straight for the one with my body still buried underneath it. "I'll think about it," I said, which is what I say when the answer is no, but the room isn't safe for a no yet. "It would mean so much to Mom," she said. There was the lever, right on schedule. Everything routed through what it would mean to Mom. Never once through what it had cost me. I could feel the shape of a plan now, even without seeing the whole thing. The visit. The plate. The softened reviews. The Thanksgiving pitch. Patricia's gentle push. My parents on standby. Pieces were moving toward something, and that something wanted me at a table, performing a healing that had never happened, so everyone else could feel healed. I drove home and set the plate on my kitchen counter, washed and clean, and stared at it for a long time. I still didn't know exactly what it was for. But I was starting to understand it wasn't decoration. Then came the gala. That's where I found out. The hospital's yearly recognition gala was 3 weeks away, and Megan was on the planning committee. Of course she was. It's usually a nice event, the one night a year the hospital puts out a real spread and hands out awards. Doctors show up. Board members show up. This year, word traveled fast, the Carter family would be attending as guests of the director. My parents, flying back out, to a work event. My work event. Megan had found herself a stage with better lighting than any break room, and she was arranging for our estranged family to appear on it, in front of the exact people who would soon decide whether I ran my own ICU. The timing wasn't subtle once you saw it. The manager panel would meet the same week as the gala. I understood it then, cold and clear. This was never a fight I could win by being right. I could be the best nurse in the building, and it wouldn't matter one bit if, on gala night, I refused to smile for the photograph. And I was starting to suspect the photograph was the whole point. That the smile was the price. And this time, the price had my future stapled to it. She said it plainly in the end, and I almost respected her for that. We were in her office, a nice office with a real window. After 10 minutes of warm small talk, she leaned back and said, "You know, the board really listens to me on culture fit for the manager role." She let that sentence sit. "It would help you," she said, "if we looked united at the gala. Mom and Dad there. All 4 of us. A nice picture. People remember a nice picture. I know some of you are yelling at your screen right now, just walk away. Hold that thought. It costs more than you think. Here's what she was actually offering, once you strip off the nice wrapping paper. Perform the reunion. Drop the boundary. Be the easy one, on camera. And I'll tell the board you're a culture fit. Refuse, and I can't promise how the impressions will land." She smiled the whole time. She probably didn't even feel it as a threat. In her story, she was helping her sister. Being the peacemaker she'd always been cast as. That's exactly what makes the golden child so effective at enforcing the rules, they don't know they're doing it. In their mind, they're just hugging you. "I'll let you know," I said, and walked back to my unit, where the monitors were honest and the stakes were only ever life and death, which right then felt like a relief. I tried the honest road first, because I always try the honest road first. I asked Dr. Whitfield for coffee and laid out my case for the manager role. Clean. No politics. Just the work. He listened. He nodded. "Claire, you're the strongest clinical candidate we have. Full stop. Then he set his cup down. But the committee weighs the culture assessment heavily this cycle. That's Megan's department. I've flagged that you two are related. I can't make them unhear her. He wasn't apologizing for a wrong he'd done. He was warning me about a wall he couldn't move. And that's the difference between a story where the narrator is naive and a story where the narrator is trapped. I saw the trap coming. I did the mature, proper thing and made my honest case to the person with real power. And it still wasn't enough. Because the game had been rigged one badge above my head, by someone who could color my entire record with a single word like warmth. Is there history there, with your sister? He asked, kind but tired. I almost told him everything. Some, I said. He waited. I didn't fill the silence. Not yet. My mother called 2 nights before the gala, and used the softest weapon in her whole arsenal. Claire, honey. That voice. The one that reaches past 34 and grabs hold of 9. Your father and I are so excited to see you shine at your work thing. Then, lower, the real pitch. Just smile for one night, sweetheart. For your father. He's not getting any younger. Can you do that for us? One nice night. One nice night. As if I were the one who'd made all the nights before it on ice. She wasn't really asking me to smile. She was asking me to agree, in a photograph that would outlive all of us, that the story was true. That we were a close family. That nothing was ever broken. And in exchange, they would love me for one evening, and my sister would tell the board I was warm, and it would cost me every true thing I knew about my own life. I have to go, Mom, I said. I know, I said, when she told me they loved me, which wasn't exactly a lie. I hung up and stood in my kitchen, finally understanding what the plate was for. I sat at my kitchen table with the plate in front of me, catching the light from the stove. They always found room for Megan. For me, they found a plate on the porch. I said it out loud, and the sentence didn't hurt the way it used to. It clarified. Because I finally saw the offer for what it was, laid flat on the table next to that plate. They weren't offering me a real seat, even now. They were offering me the plate again, dressed up nicer. This time with my whole career as the garnish. Come back to the family. Stand on the porch and smile like it's the dining room. Pretend the plate is a place setting. Perform the belonging, and we'll let you feel it, just for one evening. And I understood, at my own table, the thing it had taken a whole life and 2,000 miles to see clearly. A place you have to earn isn't a place. It's an audition. I had fled Ohio thinking I'd quit the audition. But I hadn't. I'd just moved it. For 7 years I'd kept my apartment spotless and my record perfect and my needs invisible. Still auditioning. Still proving I was easy enough to deserve the room. The porch had followed me here, because I was the one carrying it. And the strangest, freest thought arrived, quiet as a monitor beeping softly at night. I could simply not show up to the audition at all. The gala was held in the hospital's atrium, glass ceiling, borrowed chandeliers, a string trio playing music that made small talk feel important. I wore my one nice dress and walked in already knowing exactly how the night had been written, because I'd finally read the whole script. My parents were already there. My father wore the tie he only wears to funerals and weddings. When he saw me, his whole face opened up, so genuinely happy it hurt, because his love was real. It was simply never enough to move him to my side of the room. My mother wore blue, glowing like a perfect hostess. Megan glowed too. She found me within 90 seconds and steered me toward Dr. Whitfield, 2 board members, and the CEO. Everyone, this is my sister, Claire. Our ICU charge nurse. Honestly, the backbone of that whole unit. Warm. Generous. I watched the trap close with something close to admiration. In one sentence, she'd said something gracious about me, in front of the exact people who mattered, which meant if I refused the photo now, it would look like pure spite against a sister who'd just praised me. A photographer with a lanyard hovered nearby, already told where to stand. Emma was there too, holding my father's hand, watching everyone with those same careful eyes. Then a server walked by with a tray of desserts, and Megan lifted a small plate off it and held it out to me, in front of everyone. "Here," she said, laughing warmly for the crowd. "You never eat. Welcome back to the family, sis." A plate held out in front of the board, my parents, the photographer already raising his camera, Emma. The whole room tilted toward that one photograph. The reunited sisters. The offered plate. The smile that would run in the hospital newsletter and live forever. Take the plate. Smile. Get the job. Be easy. Be loved, just for one night. My mother's face glowed with pure anticipation. My father's eyes were already misting up. I felt the entire gravity of my whole life pulling my hand up to receive it. And then I looked down at Emma instead. 7 years old, watching her aunt with those careful eyes, learning in real time the exchange rate of love. Watching to see what a grown woman does when her family holds out a plate and calls it a seat. I did not raise my voice. I have stayed steady over a dying patient while a family screamed in the doorway behind me. I could stay steady here too. I looked at my sister. I looked at the plate. And very gently, I did not take it. I let my hands stay at my sides. "No, thank you," I said. Quiet enough that only our circle heard. The photographer lowered his camera, confused. My mother's glow flickered. And the warm little plate hung in the air between us, with nowhere left to land. And the old crooked house, 2,000 miles and 25 years away, finally, quietly, came all the way down. Megan's smile stayed frozen a beat too long. "Claire," she said, softer now, stepping in close. "Don't do this here. Please, just take the plate." My mother closed in on my other side, still smiling for the room, her voice a sharp hiss under the music. "Claire Bennett. Do not embarrass this family. Not here." There it was. The whole thing, finally undressed. The fear was never about losing me. It was about the picture. About the story staying smooth. "I know what you're offering," I said to Megan, my voice level, aimed only at the two of them. "The photo, and then a good word to the board. I'm not going to trade my life for a job. And since the job is tied to it now, I'm withdrawing from the manager search. Tomorrow I'll tell the panel myself." Megan's face went white. "You're throwing it away," she whispered. "You'd throw away the thing you actually want, just to spite us?" That was the exact moment I could have gotten angry. I didn't, because I finally understood, I wasn't spiting anyone. I was walking out of an audition I'd been standing inside since I was 9. "I'm not spiting you," I said. "I'm just done paying for it." My mother's mask cracked open. For one true second, I saw all the way down, a frightened woman who had spent her entire life earning her own seat by keeping everyone else's story smooth. A woman who had left a plate on a porch once, because that was the only arithmetic she'd ever been taught. Subtract the difficult child, so the picture stays warm. I almost felt the old pull to comfort her, to smooth it over one more time. Instead I said the sentence I'd carried across the country for 7 years. "You told me family doesn't keep score, Mom." I looked at her, not unkindly. "You're right. I'm done keeping score. I'm keeping distance." Then, to all of it, the plate, the porch, the 25 years behind it, quiet enough that only the three of us heard. "A place you have to earn isn't a place. It's an audition. And I'm done auditioning." I set my untouched water glass down, and I walked out of that circle. Past the photographer. Past my father, tears already forming. Into the cold, clean air of the parking lot. And I did not look back to see the picture I had just refused to be in. I sat in my car for a long time, waiting for the panic to arrive. The old dread of having been difficult. Of having ruined the picture. Of the punishment that always followed a no in that family. It never came. What came instead was quiet. I had just walked away from the exact job I wanted, in front of the people who could have given it to me. And for the first time I could remember, I felt like I was not being graded on anything at all. That's when I understood what I'd actually done. It wasn't really about Megan, or the board, or even the plate. For 7 years I had believed leaving Ohio had set me free. But I'd carried the audition with me the whole time, keeping my life flawless, my needs invisible, my edges filed smooth, still trying to prove I was easy enough to deserve a place in the room. Walking out of that circle wasn't the first brave thing I'd ever done. It was the first time I'd stopped performing a belonging I was never given, and simply decided to belong to myself instead. The porch didn't lose its power that night because I finally won my family's approval. It lost its power because I stopped needing that approval at all. My hand stayed steady on the wheel. Somewhere above me, the gala was still going. My mother, no doubt, was already reshaping the moment into a story where I was the cold one and she was blameless, because that story was the only house she knew how to live inside. Let her live there. I wasn't a room in it anymore. I started the car. The clean plate was still sitting on my kitchen counter at home, and driving through the empty streets, I knew exactly what I was finally going to do with it. I withdrew from the manager search the very next morning, in writing, before I could talk myself out of it. The job went to a good, decent nurse from the cardiac floor, who would do just fine, and who never had to sell a single piece of herself to get it. I stayed on as charge nurse in my ICU, which I love, on the unit I'd built with my own 2 hands. Dr. Whitfield stopped me in the hallway the following week and never once asked what had happened at the gala. He just said, "Whatever that was, you did the right thing." It showed. A month later, he asked me to design and lead a brand new nurse training program for the whole hospital. A real program. My own curriculum. My own name on it. Built entirely around the honest, unsoftened kind of teaching my sister had once tried to file down into something smaller. It wasn't a consolation prize. It was the clean, honest result of being someone people could trust, offered by a man who never once needed me to perform anything to earn it. My parents flew back home to Ohio. My mother and I are not repaired. She still believes I humiliated her that night, and she tells her own version now, one where the porch never happened at all, because that's the only room she can still afford to live inside. I've stopped trying to remodel it for her. That old force didn't die because I finally stood up to it. It simply lost its grip on me. But here's the part one never saw coming. 3 weeks after the gala, a large envelope arrived from Ohio, addressed in careful, childish handwriting. Inside was a drawing. From Emma. 2 stick figures sitting at a table. One big, one small. In front of each of them, drawn carefully in brown crayon, a plate. The exact same size. Both figures at the table. No porch anywhere in the picture. On the back, in Megan's handwriting, one single line. She drew this on her own, unprompted. And then, underneath, in smaller writing, like it cost her something to admit it, I've been thinking about the plates. I don't know if my sister will ever climb all the way out of the warm house she was raised inside to guard. Golden children rarely do. That house is comfortable, and leaving it means finally admitting the porch was real. But she had noticed. She had noticed the plates. And her own daughter, 7 years old, had already drawn a table where both places were set, all on her own, because one afternoon, a blunt aunt had told her she was allowed. That she never had to ask for water. That she never had to be easy in order to be loved. That's exactly where the chain finally breaks. Not in the ones who were taught the old arithmetic. In the ones who never learn it in the first place. I put Emma's drawing up on my refrigerator, right next to the clean plate I finally understood completely. And I stopped waiting for the family I was born into to ever set me a place. I used to think love was a table you had to earn your way back to. It isn't. It's a plate someone sets out for you before you even have to ask. A cold plate on a porch. A warm one on a desk. It took me 7 years to learn the real difference between the two. If you've ever set a boundary and been told it was cruel, just because your family had always called it that, then you already know exactly how heavy that plate can feel. And how light your hands finally feel the moment you stop holding it. This channel is for you. Subscribe, and I'll see you at the next story.